Here we are, beginning of season 3 with a banger of an episode. Welcome back. The season is full of surprises. New episode formats such as art travelogues and art topics. But this one changed in name only. The segment Exhibition Chinwag is more or less the same as the whole of the first season, where I was the dusty specialist and my co-host, the wonderful Emily Harding, who is back in the next episode of this segment, was the novice exhibition goer. My new Art Outsider guest today is Susie Riddell, who was a joy to have over for many, many reasons. It was really fascinating to chat with her because although we both work in creative fields, the rules are so different. You must be wondering in what field exactly Susie works in, or you are recognizing her name because she is no fish out of water when it comes to podcasts. Susie is one half of the award-winning podcast Limited Time Only, which she co-hosts with Esther Stanford. I actually watched Susie and Esther receive their award live at the Independent Women Podcast Awards at the BBC Studios a few months ago, and they completely won me over. Susie jumped up and down like a kid, and Esther had such an air of utter confusion that it really cracked me up. But don't be fooled by their humble attitudes, because since we recorded this episode, Limited Time Only received a second award, the Women Who Podcast Award, in the category Laughter and Cheer. So listen, all I wish for them is for this streak to continue to the point where they'll do their best Doris Lessing when she learned through a reporter stalking her outside of her home that she had won the Nobel Prize and seemed utterly unfazed, even a bit bored.
You've won the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Oh, Christ.
How do you feel?
What? Well, it's been going on now for 30 years. One can get more excited. Right.
Well,
I'm sure you'd like some uplifting remarks of some kind.
There are other people here, so I just...
any kind of remarks. Just tell me what this prize means to you.
Well, it's been going, as I say, for 30 years. One can get more excited than one gets, you know.
But this is a recognition of your life's work.
Yes.
This is all I wish for all of us, all of you out there, and for myself, to just have the Doris Lessing level of no fucks given. So back to Susie, who is a multi-hyphenated professional. She is the co-director of the theatre company Idiot Child, which we did not get to talk about, didn't have time, but she did share some insights into her voice work. You'll even learn how to do the best Liverpool accent. The only question is, should you? Okay, just kidding. Another thing I have to mention is that because we talk about a calimocho, and if you don't know what that is, you'll soon find out. Susie mentioned a snake bite in black, which is, I can confirm because we had a few doubts, an alcoholic beverage made of equal parts lager, cider, and black currant cordial. Yum. I also mentioned Sight Wombly, and it occurs to me now that I was so intent on making a point that I didn't get to mention how some of Jenny Saville's drawings and paintings in the exhibition bear Twombly-like scribbles, which add another layer to the work. And you'll also get to witness Susie discovering Sight Twombly. It really is what Exhibition Chinwag is for, and I am so here for it. I'm so grateful that I got to experience that with someone as special as Susie. So another heads up for those of you who have been following Exhibitionistas out there. In this season, I am more relaxed about the exhibition visits because the more I invite people who have questions and who are fascinating and have curious, inquisitive minds, the more we get to address certain questions that may not have been obvious to me were I not talking to someone outside of my little art bubble. And so we really wander off sometimes into very specific areas of the contemporary art field or even the artist's work. And I want the episode to make space for that. I do advise you to follow us on Instagram, or better yet, to sign up to the Exhibitionistas files through the description notes of the episode, because I will have images of the show there, as well as useful links, such as, for example, the New Yorker article that I refer to in the episode, written by Rebecca Mead about Jenny Saville. So, all of this said and done, this is Exhibitionistas. I am your host, Joana Piar-Neves, contemporary art writer and curator. And don't forget, we visit exhibitions so that you have to. And now, on with the episode. Enjoy. Hi there, and thank you for joining us today. We are talking about Jenny Saville's exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery in London. The title of the exhibition is The Anatomy of Painting, and you have exactly 2 days to visit it if you're in London. Rush to the National Portrait Gallery. I'm really chuffed today because I have a new guest co-host, and she is a fellow colleague podcaster. It's none other than Susie Riddell from the award-winning podcast Limited Time Only. She is not only a podcaster, but also an actor, a voice artist, a writer, and a presenter. And you probably will recognize her voice from the world's longest running drama, The Archers, on BBC. Her character's name is Tracy Horrobin. So it really is an immense pleasure to have you here, Susie. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this crazy experiment.
Thank you very much for having me, Joanna. I feel like I kind of foisted myself upon you, actually. I sort of was like, please have me as a guest on your podcast. So you didn't really have much choice, did you? Could all podcasts be a bit like that, you know, to take your guests somewhere different and interesting and spark off other different thoughts and avenues, especially something creative like that. I was delighted to be asked and delighted to go to this particular exhibition as well.
Before we went in, I said, listen, let's take a selfie so that we have a before and after.
We didn't do an after, did we?
We were so exhausted by the end of it, we completely forgot.
I was very, very tired yesterday afternoon. And I was remembering you saying that you get tired at exhibitions and taking it all in. I think we'd done about an hour and a half, hadn't we? An hour 40 or whatever at the exhibition. And I said, that's me done. I'm exhibited out. Because you said, yes, I get exhausted when I go to exhibitions. It really made me think when I got home, God, I am dog tired. I had to sort of, I think I had a nap.
Did knowing that you were going to do the episode have an impact on that? Did you visit it differently? Were you more tired than usual when you see an exhibition?
Maybe, because I think I spent a lot longer in there than I probably would have done if I'd been on my own. Because obviously we were discussing things. I was able to ask you questions, so I was taking that in. I suppose I was really trying to really look. I do often read the little, bits of blurb by the sides of pictures, which I think is quite exhausting in itself, trying to do the text and then get what you can initially from the picture, read the text, go back to the picture. But I probably wouldn't have spent that long with that one artist. Even though it was a special exhibition, I think I would have probably been an hour tops and moved on a bit. But yeah, so I think I did approach it with more of a sense of purpose that I needed to remember. But it wasn't arduous. It was quite nice, actually. I think, in a way, it would be great to record a podcast after every time I went to an art exhibition, because I think that gives it a focus that sometimes I feel I don't have when I go to an exhibition. When I see a play, your focus is the play and you're following the story from the beginning to end. I still find that exhausting. Yeah. And I actually often can't discuss a play straight afterwards. I have to go away. I mean, it's funny when you go to see a play with somebody, you know, you've met up at the theatre, you have a chat, you go to see the play, chat about the play in the interval a bit, go to see the end, you come out and then you're like, okay, then, yeah, what are you doing next week? It could have been something really life-changing, but it's hard to kind of get the words and you need to process it, don't you? And I think that's what we were doing as we were going along, which is why it's so exhausting. And as you say, it's every part of you is involved in looking at the picture.
I enjoy this idea that I have to carve my own space and I have to look around and be mindful of what other people are doing. This experience we have in the 19th century had this idea we must travel, we must go to the sea to heal and to, you know, encounter the elements and be a better person. But now, a century later, it's like, oh, I'm doing Thailand.
Oh yeah, I'm doing.
And they're like, no, Thailand should do you.
Yeah,
Like, no, just have some reverence, have some sense
I completely agree. Yeah.
And I enjoy that museums, I loved your description because I love that museums make you feel, first, that you have this space where you don't quite know how to behave. And then you have to measure your movement in space and your attention and your focus and your intention. That was such a lovely experience to have together as a first 3D encounter.
Yes.
It was really, we're not going to forget that.
I felt a little bit like I was a student and you were my tutor.
Oh, no, don't say that.
Not in a bad way. There's not a negative at all to say that. I felt like it was a great opportunity to be able to ask those questions that I thought perhaps were a bit silly, but you made me feel comfortable enough that I didn't worry about asking, how big was the paintbrush?
No, they were really good questions. But before we move on, do you want to talk about your award-winning podcast, Limited Time Only, which I must say is the most endearing podcast out there, because not only are you colleagues with Esther, but you're also great friends. Such a lovely thing to listen to because it just gives you energy and it makes you believe in humanity again. But also you do sketches because you're both wonderful professionals and you also interview people. And one of the best interviews out there, a very uncanny experience, is when you interviewed the person who does the voice of Wallace in Wallace and Gromit. And that was... I didn't even have a word for it because I love Wallace and Gromit.
Oh, do you? Oh, brilliant.
And it was just so funny to see, and also to see the work of the voice. So firstly, I'm going to ask you to quickly introduce the podcast and also maybe talk about voice acting, because I don't think we talk enough about it.
Yes, Limited Time Only, award-winning. We just won an International Women's Podcast Award for Comedy Gold. Our little tagline, if I could sum it up, is it's a pick-me-up in podcast form. So our aim is to brighten your day, and we do that through a mix of chat between myself and Esther, who we've known each other for over 36 years. I know we don't look that old, but
no, we look 18 positively.
We were in a youth drama group together from the age of 12, and are now several decades older. But we know each other really well and are very similar people. And we do genuinely love each other. So, and our chemistry is completely natural and it's just a joy. I really admire what you do, Joanna, because I couldn't do a podcast. I wouldn't have the motivation to do a podcast on my own. I would give up after about 2. But having Esther there really helps.
I'm just bossy. That's what it is.
You boss yourself around.
Yeah.
So we have chats between us. We have comedy sketches that are all original and to do with the topic of the episode. And we interview interesting people like Ben Whitehead, who's the voice of Wallace and Gromit. And we've had pop stars and broadcasters and sports people and all sorts of... and actors, comedians and artists as well. We had an artist, Nadia Latora came on.
Yes.
So, I mean, we believe everyone is interesting. Everyone's got an interesting story to tell. But voice work, I mean, talking to Ben's really interesting because he doesn't sound remotely like Wallace in real life.
Not at all. That's what was so peculiar.
This is the first time we've had a bona fide Hollywood superstar on the show.
Who's there?
Because
Who's there?
It's you, Ben. You've just been at the Oscars.
I have just been in Hollywood.
It's amazing what the human voice is capable of, isn't it? And what Ben does in the way of changing his voice is just phenomenal. And I loved hearing how he described getting into the voice. And that's something that's quite common. Like, people often have a phrase or a certain word or something they have to say to get into a certain accent or whatever. But I think everyone is capable of doing all these things. It's like, I think everyone's capable of doing most things, really, if we just concentrated. I was recording an audiobook, actually.
And do you have other directives? Like, do you have to have a certain speech pattern? Do you have to have a certain... Because in England, the accents are quite a thing. There's so many of them. And I always wondered, is there a sort of a BBC speak that you have to do for audiobooks?
No. I mean, what will happen with an audiobook is they will ask... So if they wanted me... So my criteria, my voice would be either RP, received pronunciation, which is kind of no discernible British accent. It is just quite a plain. I'm not.
How can you?
It's called RP, and it's there. So, for example, I suppose it is like a BBC speak of the past would have been very much like that. That would have been the RP accent from the 1930s, 40s, etc. That's how they would speak, and everyone would speak like that. And you'd go to drama school and you'd learn to speak like that. Of course, we don't speak like that anymore.
It's a Judi Dench.
Yes, and I think a lot of actors of that generation didn't speak like that, went to drama school and had their accents knocked out of them. But now, if you want something quite plain, I'm not discernibly from the north of England. I'm not discernibly. I suppose people you would say from the south of England, I suppose, but I could be from the north. I just haven't got an accent. Or I often get cast as for Scottish narration as well. I was born in Scotland. I'm of Scottish heritage, and I can do a very good Scottish accent. So sometimes I have to do that. But sometimes they want a northern voice or a specific part of the UK. It depends what the book is. I've done a lot of books for Liverpool, believe it or not. I've got no links with Liverpool whatsoever. I can just do quite a good Liverpool accent.
With all apologies, my sincerest apologies.
Do you hate the Liverpool accent?
Horrifying.
What's wrong with it? It's absolutely fine. That wasn't a great accent.
I'm so sorry. It was great. And isn't it the accent of that series Adolescent? Is it the
yeah,
actor?
Stephen Graham, yeah.
Yes. Oh,
it's quite abrasive at times. It depends which part you're doing. I quite like
endearing.
It though, because it's really exciting to do. It's like interesting in your mouth. If I watch myself on the screen, my mouth's going really wide because they're not going down like that. It's right out to the side. So that's how I would get that accent. And then Scottish is a bit more forward, so I've got a bit more of a pout. And it also, I mean, obviously there's so many different accents in the country and different dialects, so it depends which part of Scotland you're going to do. But that would be I suppose, I don't know, Aberdeen, Fife side of Scotland. But yes, pouty. And then the Liverpool, like, you see, it's much more open like that. I think it's fascinating.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating because what really fascinates me, and I need to find more about, is when people have go into a coma, they have something, they wake up and they have what's called foreign accent syndrome, and they start speaking with a completely different accent. I have seen white English women who wake up and start speaking with a Jamaican accent or Italian or Chinese. It's hilarious, but it's like, they're not taking the pee and they're not doing a mock-up. They are absolutely, if you dropped her into Jamaica, she would sound like everybody around her. Amazing. And I think there's something weird going on there. There's a cross soul.
Very weird.
There's something going on in the ether when they're out of it. That they've just, someone else's voice has gone into them.
They collected someone's soul.
Yes, that's what I think. Something, because it's too weird. I know the brain's
clever,
somewhere
talking to someone else for so long that they acquired the accent.
Yeah, or they've time travelled back to somewhere and become somebody else. It's amazing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really weird, really weird.
Fascinating, all of this.
Yes, but not Jenny Saville.
Jenny Saville was born in 1970 in Cambridge. She moved across the UK quite a bit because her mum was an elementary school teacher, but her dad was a school administrator. So she was in the kind of education environment, and she's very well read. She also had an uncle who was a really important influence in her life, Paul Saville. He was an artist. He was also an arts teacher in a private school, and he took her passion for arts seriously. So seriously that he taught her a lot of techniques. And apparently it was so obsessive that he made her draw a hedge every day for a whole year. And she said it was really interesting because the hedge changes across the year.
Yes, yeah.
And it also changes you. And I'm quoting her here. And it's so interesting that she was doing the same thing, looking at the same thing in a huge span of time, especially for a child, because he was a child back then. Yeah. But another thing that he did that was quite interesting is that they traveled a lot. And they traveled not only to go to museums, but also to visit the places where Rembrandt painted, like a bridge in Venice, where Titian painted a certain painting or did a certain drawing. And so they would go to the exact places. Yeah. And they also would go to the studio. So she went to Rembrandt's studio. And she says that when she went in, it's now a museum, actually. I think in the beginning of the 2000s, it became a museum. And she says that looking at the light made her understand the difference between the light coming through the window and the fire, you know, in the corner in the fireplace. And she observed that space so much. And also then they went out and they would go to the butcher. And she would imagine he would go to the butcher and buy a piece of meat and then put it in the studio. And she says that she became fascinated with artist studios much more than with artists. And so in some ways, her uncle didn't romanticize being an artist. He kind of went through the nitty-gritty and the technical aspects of it. So much so that he even advocated drinking red wine and Coca-Cola at 9 a.m. in the morning. Which
it's a bizarre mix, isn't it?
It's
disgusting.
Don't, Susie, you don't know what you're saying. It's delicious.
Is it?
And it has a name.
Okay.
It's Spanish and it's called a calimocho.
I'm gonna have to try this. I mean, I know. I mean, there's mixes that we have here like beer and cider. No,
Pimm's.
No,
Pimm's
hang on, I'm talking the wrong thing. Is it beer and blackcurrant? And cider? I can't remember. The snake bite and black. Can't remember what it is. Do you know that one?
I don't know.
Or diesel.
No. Well, diesel sounds.
I mean,
really
it's the same
bad.
as snake bite and black, but it's the northern version.
I didn't know about that.
Oh my god! So right, okay. So red wine and well, I'm going to give it a go because I'm.
Well, think of a shandy.
I do love a shandy. That's true.
Lemonade,
and beer.
Well, fizzy lemonade and beer.
There's something about the red wine. Well, cherry Coke exists. It could. I'm going to try it. I'm going on holiday on Friday. I'm going to have what's it called again?
Calimocho.
I'm going to have a calimocho.
Yep. And it's really
at 9 a.m.
delicious.
Thanks very much, kids.
Yes,
right.
exactly.
Move over.
Anywho, she said she wouldn't recommend it, and
not at that hour.
Not at 9 a.m. At the very least. And so she says, "quote It made me feel like the things I was doing, making paintings in my room, was the way I could live." So very early on, she had this idea that she could be an artist. Artists work in studios; they have a space. So in 1988, she enrolled at the Glasgow School of Art, where, quote, everybody had a Freud catalogue at their feet when they were painting. But weirdly, you almost, and I'm quoting her here, she also said you almost had to apologize to be a painter at the time. Because in the art field and also in art schools at the time, we were coming, so it was the 80s, and we were coming off a moment where there was a lot of performance, 60s and 70s, there was a lot of conceptual art, there was a lot of abstract minimalist art. And so the teachers at the time were teaching that. That's what they were bringing into the art school. And so painting, when you look at Jenny Saville's work, you kind of draw a direct line to Freud, to Lucian Freud. But when she was at school, it was not a given at all. But to contextualize this, because there's a UK painting history or art history, and then there's the whole of Europe. In 1988, so when she goes into school and starts painting, Gerhard Richter, who we did an episode about, who was this German, really important painting, like real reference in the art world, was painting a series called October 18th, 1977, which takes as its subject the Baader-Meinhof group. So, this terrorist group in Germany that he took on as, a decade later as a subject, as a German artist who grew up in Eastern Germany, had to flee Eastern Germany to West Germany to live in Berlin, undercover, hiding out, leaving his family, not seeing them for many, many years. And so there was another kind of painting being done. Richter is known for copying photography very faithfully, the glitches, the blurs, and also doing abstract painting, like having a sort of a very broad take on painting. So this was what was happening. And in the same year, 1988, he had, I think, his first exhibition in London at Anthony Dauphin's gallery. So there was a presence of painting, but a very specific kind of painting. Like Gerhard Richter was not picking sides. He was doing abstract painting as much as realist painting and taking in technology, so photography, in his own painting. Whereas in the UK, we are going to relate Jenny Saville much more with Francis Bacon, Frank Auerbach, Lucian Freud, what is called the London School. So in 1991, there's a huge shift for her. She goes to the University of Cincinnati in the US, and she does something which was not happening in Glasgow at the time, women's gender and sexuality studies. And so she reads a lot of Julia Kristeva, Hélène Cixous, Luce Irigaray. So all these feminists, French, most of them, that kind of open up something for her in terms of painting. So there's this real relationship with female bodies in painting, right? Do you talk about the representation of women, for example, in your own craft, and are you aware of how it's talked about in contemporary art?
Drama, it's discussed and all the time. We have, there's moments where I'm in a scene with somebody, a woman. In fact, it was one of our guests recently, an actress called Lucy Speed, and we had a scene together in The Archers, and she was very conscious that the scene was these two women sort of being quite bitchy and arguing, and often that's how women get portrayed, as these kind of I don't know, they don't like other women. It's when other women don't like other women, and that is something we try and avoid in a way, because I don't think it's not helpful in the wider context of everything else. We need to stick together. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of female form in art, isn't there? From right from the beginning, a lot of naked women
exactly.
on the walls of many galleries around the world. Yeah, I mean, so many. It's almost not surprising, isn't it? Not surprising at all when you see a boob or whatever, when you walk into a gallery. You must expect to see a boob in paint and sculpture form. Yeah, it's interesting.
One of the things that we're becoming really aware of, for example, is in Greek mythology. There's a lot of sexual assault.
Yes, yeah. There's constantly women being dragged or pierced.
I think what is very strange about Jenny Saville, and we'll probably talk about it, is that her upbringing is quite patriarchal. So you have her uncle. And when she talks about what she calls her team of artists, so her family of artists, she quotes Velázquez, Rembrandt, Titian, who you very well noted as we were coming in, dear listeners. Susie told me, I know nothing about art. I mean, I do love a Titian. And I was thinking, wow, yeah, the reference for Jenny Saville, she nailed it.
I couldn't believe that when I saw the first thing on the chart on the wall of her sort of, going to see this piece. And I thought, oh, God, well, there you are then. I didn't need to know anything else. I just need to know.
I know everything.
I know one thing, which is everything. Yeah.
And so she quotes, so
They're all
Titian,
male.
Picasso. Exactly.
Yeah, I didn't.
And there's
yes.
more.
Oh, really?
De Kooning,
Yes.
Michelangelo, Leonardo, Twombly, Monet, Soutine, and Matisse.
And they're all,
Only
apart
men.
from Kooning, what era is he? Oh, he's
So-
alive, is he?
No, de Kooning is 20th century.
20th century.
So he's abstract, beginning of the abstract expressionist movement. Cy Twombly, she actually was friends with him for a while. So Cy Twombly is this painter who has a very strong relationship with classic literature. Dante, all of those references, like really classical references, as Jenny Saville does. And his paintings, on the other hand, are quite childish in the sense of the line. They look like scribbles. They look like doodles. I am going to send you on the chat.
Gosh, yeah, crikey. I mean, this is fascinating because I look at that and go, I'm sorry, what? That is literally squiggles. And
It is.
And I can't, oh, but it's massive.
Yeah.
Is it always massive?
They were quite sizable paintings, a little bit like, 3 by 2 meters, for example, sometimes much bigger.
It's fascinating. I would love to learn more about that. And there's one further down. My son
Tell me
the
what
other
you're
day.
looking at.
It's black squiggles,
Yes.
starting quite small and they get quite big. It's almost filling the page. My son, who's 7, the other day, he said the best drawing he's ever done, and he'd drawn what he said was a waterfall, and it was squiggles all the way up, because he really saw the waterfall in it. But it's literally just him with a black pen, and he's so proud of it. But it kind of reminds me of that. So, this is where I struggle slightly. And I expect a lot of people struggle, but I can see that that's enormous. So I think the effect of seeing it on this little page here in a tiny box, entirely different to standing as I can see. I mean, it's twice the height of a human. That is going to have a different effect.
Yes, I think seeing them in the flesh is really interesting and quite an impact on you, because someone is taking so seriously the first marks that you're going to do on a page and really studying how, when a child draws, and if you look at children's drawings, there's no bad drawing.
No.
The question of good and bad is absolutely irrelevant. And that's what he's interested in. He's interested in that sweet spot where you're just marking, you're mark making, and you are going beyond what is good, what is bad, and you're entering a territory where there's no difference between writing, drawing, and painting, which is the origin of the word graphic, comes from graphane, and it's in Greek it was inscribing, and it was as much writing as it was drawing. It really was this idea of being close to mark making and close to a dimension of relation with reality that is almost unmediated by knowledge.
Yeah, I enjoy work that is quite immersive, I suppose. I mean, I'd really enjoy going to see the Cy Twombly, partly because what a great name. I mean, that's one of the best names I've ever heard. I'd love to be called Susie Twombly. But that scale, the scale of a work, what I like feeling is small. I think it's very healthy.
You do?
Yeah, I think it's really healthy experience to feel, to have a sense of your own unimportance in a way against something, and I suppose in the face of the entirety of humanity or whatever's being depicted of human emotion.
So don't you think that it's interesting that he's giving so much importance to those squiggles?
Yeah.
And to that compulsive mark making.
Yes, it's humanness, it's creativity in its purest form, isn't it? Because it's just happening. I mean, it's not obviously with him because he's thought about it excessively, but
of course,
but it is
as well.
But yes, well, yeah, because it's in his inherent gift, I suppose. And yeah.
And that's the thing about contemporary art. I think in the whole of the 20th century, there's been this move into a kind of authenticity of gesture in the performance pieces that you sometimes see on video and you think, what is going on? What are they doing? Yeah. And, you know, artists, voice artists like Meredith Monk, who's a composer, but like a lot in relation to the minimalist movement, who's just deconstructing voice. And some of her work is really like stutterings in singing form. And you listen to that and you think, why is she not singing properly?
Voice is the first instrument, and that it's a direct connection to the deepest level of energies and feelings for which we don't have words. So I felt this very strong power of the voice to be a universal kind of instrument. I just knew that I was onto something that had truth. There was just no question about it. And I felt that I was meant to do this.
In the 20th century, there was this idea of let's get to that creative impulse and let's also have this appreciation for the glitch, for the error, for the meandering, for the not good, for this kind of fixation on good painting, on good sculpture, on technically... Why do people listen to podcasts? Because there's a lot of mistakes. And there's this kind of sense of authenticity, although we do edit to the bone.
Well, I don't
People
anymore.
don't realise it.
But I do. Yeah, there is a lot of editing. But yes, it's because you're listening to a conversation, isn't it? Rather than something that's, been either scripted or absolutely
and exploring.
shaped
There's
within an inch of its life.
self-exploration in podcasting where you are vulnerable and you risk an idea that may not be yours at the end of the day, now that you've tested it.
Yeah. So we've got to go back to that, to the embracing the imperfection. And I think that idea of those pieces where I go round an art gallery and I go, oh my God, I mean, what is that? I don't get it. But in a way, I'll get something from it.
But so... to finish on this, there is this really strange shift in her work whereby she goes to the United States, she goes to gender studies, which didn't exist in Glasgow School of Art. And she later on befriended Linda Knockling, who in the contemporary art world is quite an important reference because in 1971, she wrote an article provocatively titled, "Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists?" And you can imagine, this is the 70s, so bringing it home that we don't have female artists in museums. And we will never say this enough. Like when Saville was born, a year later, Linda Knockland was writing this. So this is all very recent.
Yeah.
And the conversations we're having now, you know, in cinema, in contemporary art, they're all very recent.
Because how can it be? It's almost impossible to redress. In that, you know, you think of the centuries of work, it's going to have to be another sort of 600 years before. But then you've still got those other extra 600 years of all the male artists.
Tintoretto had a daughter who was a painter, and the King of Spain actually wanted to hire her, and he didn't let her.
God.
And the lot of women who painted were the daughters of painters. And so they remained in the studio. And you can be sure that a lot of paintings that you see in the National Gallery have some brushstrokes of a lot of women who were just not historicized. And it's interesting because I heard this expression. I just did an interview. When this episode comes out, the interview will have come out with E.J. Scott, who is this trans curator and trans activist who was talking about, he created something called the Museum of Transology. And he was talking about how trans people are historically homeless. And I love that expression. You don't have a home. And as a person who identifies as a woman, you go into a museum and you don't see authorship associated with the gender you feel that you are and that you identify with. Yeah. And that has a massive impact.
Absolutely.
And it's so big that you can't see it.
Yeah, and well, it's the question of representation across across gender and sexuality and race within everything, isn't it? It's a huge issue, and that you can see steps being taken, but it's something you're not even, I don't know, aware when you're not even aware of it in a way. Well, certainly as a young person, and I look back at the things I liked and the women, it's like, well, there's not very many women there, but I sort of identified with the male characters or whatever, or people that I'd like to be, and then you think back, well, actually, but it's not quite it, is it? Because there's not a me. And obviously when you funnel, it gets to narrower and narrower when you get to, trans people. That is, I think that the idea of homelessness is it's an awful thought, but it's completely true. And I hope that
the museum as a home.
Yeah,
the museum is a home,
and it's for everybody.
For everybody,
but
it should be.
When there isn't a representation there, it's not, because you still, and it's like that with theatre, and it's and classical music, and opera, but I know that institutions are trying to change that. But if you can't see yourself, you're not going to want to do that for a living, and then it just perpetuates, doesn't it?
Time for a short break to let you into the Exhibitionista studio. Look around you. There is a computer, a good mic, the software in the computer, which is a sort of virtual space through which you and I meet with a time and space delay. Then there are my books and 2 perfectly round Flintstones. All the magic happens here. I've been talking to a university whose students need placements, and I could use some assistance with production and research, while also mentoring the future professionals of the field. But for that, I have to pay them, and that's where you come in. Do you know how much a membership costs? A mere £25 a year, which means that you pay £2 a month. £25 for a whole year. When you buy a catalogue, that's the average price for one single book with 2 texts. If you become a member of Exhibitionistas through a platform called Substack, you not only get to support Exhibitionistas, but you also receive on average about 18 more texts minimum that I will have written about many, many, many fascinating topics of contemporary art, philosophy of art, and many other subjects. There's a little bonus that I added, which is getting to ask me questions. If you have a question about contemporary art, about the field, about the market, about studies in contemporary art, I'm very, very happy to do the research for you, or to dig into my little well of knowledge and put the information out there for you. I can name you, or you can be anonymous, so you get to put me to work, as long as the questions and the prompts you give me are within my abilities and the research material available to me. Otherwise, you can go to donor box in the description notes. If you have £1 to spare, you can just donate one time, very, very small amounts. That's what I do with Wikipedia. Once in a while, I put some money in there because I use it almost daily. And I want to reward people who nourish me. Thank you for spending some time with me here in my studio. Thank you for considering this decent proposal. On with the episode. So she comes back, 1992, okay? So she's 22 years old, right? Putting that into perspective and talking about the strong-willed character of Jenny Saville. She makes this painting called Propped, 1992. It's 7 by 6 foot. It's so about 180 by 210 meters, and she writes on it. It's quite a massive presence, let's say, in the exhibition space.
There's a huge portrait of a naked woman from an angle. We're already looking up at it, but it's painted from an angle where the foreground is very much the woman's legs, her thighs, and it kind of gets smaller up to her head, which is actually slightly off the top of the picture, and sort of upraised, but you can't see her face totally clearly. But she's definitely gazing up at this person, but she's sitting on a very uncomfortable stool. I mean, I thought it looked like it was digging into her legs. It was almost tree-like, I thought, like which might be relevant, I suppose, but that sort of sticking into her calf, and also very uncomfortably.
You're very polite, because I think for me she's being impaled.
That's the word.
You're being
impaled.
awfully polite.
Yeah, impaled.
It looks like it's basically making her.
Well, that's yes, but there's another bit that looks like the bit that looked more uncomfortable to me was the bit digging into her leg. But then yes,
right,
the central
it's
post.
Not a straight.
No, it's
not a straight leg.
It's like
it's kind of an old
like
classical
stool or a bit of trunk or something. But yes, it looks like it's impaling her vaginally, which is not very comfortable. And kind of a lot of flesh. A lot. It looks. It's sort of spilling over really on this stool, and her knuckles are digging into, fingers digging into her thighs. Very uncomfortable. It looks very. There's a great amount of discomfort. It's not. It doesn't look like pain in a way. It's more. It's
a bit defying as well. Pre-pain, maybe. She's. I don't know. She's interesting.
It's like a almost hurting herself. That gripping, the digging your nails into yourself, is almost a self-preservation. I think when you're hurting yourself to avoid feeling the rest of it. I think something there. But yeah, and then this text, which is as if you're looking through, as if it's in front of you, you're looking through a window that it's written on the other side, so it's kind of backwards, which is,
and it's kind of like drawn
in.
Like as if she had taken her finger and written with the paint, like putting a finger into the paint and
yes, because it reflects exactly the same colours as the image in front. So yes, it's
an indentation.
Bit of herself. Yeah,
exactly. And the text says, "If we continue to speak in this sameness, speak as men have spoken for centuries, we will fail each other." And it's this idea that failing each other speaks of the sisterhood, like the community. And then, it's a sentence by Luz Irigaray, who's this feminist philosopher. And she does talk about community. So Propt is a self-portrait. I mean, she doesn't like to talk about portraits, but she did use her own image. She did use her own body. And she talks about, and so it's described as being this kind of fat blob of a woman, of an ugly woman, and also an affiliation very specifically to Lucian Freud's painting. And Lucian Freud was known and almost kind of like infamous for working with models that he kind of extracted the truth from, right? He was kind of this truth teller about people. And there's this painting that's quite famous of his, with this very, very plump woman on a couch, lying down on a couch. And this definitely is her quoting that operation of looking at someone else, but she's reverting the situation. So the reverted text kind of tells you that here is the woman painting herself, so looking at herself. And she said, I liked painting a nude body, which was very frowned on in feminist studies. Where's the gaze? All that kind of debate. That conflict is what made that painting work. So, of course, she's conflicted. So her preference is a male. She is going straight into body and soul, into the most patriarchal tradition of portraiture, painting, huge dimensions. So her paintings are all very, very big, so large scale paintings. And she is very upfront about it. And she said, I went to Venice, I went to Florence, I went everywhere. The paintings were huge. And I wanted to do that. I saw myself making that. I saw myself in that pleasure of expanding on that big surface. So you could say, echoing like much later feminism, saying like you want to take
up
space.
Yeah.
And then in 93, 94, she's going to produce another painting, which is called Trace, which is also in the exhibition, it's a body seen from the back with the lines of a bra and knickers drawn, indenting onto the flesh. And the flesh is painted in a way that pretty much emulates Lucian Freud's painting of the skin in its grey, green, pinkish, yellowish tones. Very white skin.
There was something a bit about this, that painting gave me a bit of an idea of the mortuary slab, to be honest. That image, the trace, because it was so pale and tinged, and with the lines, and I think because the arms are not visible, really, it just gave me a sense of it just being almost lifeless, although it's not horizontal. But yeah, there was something, the idea that we're constricted,
contained.
Contained by these, but kind of I don't know, the trappings of being a woman, and also how those parts are so sexualized and viewed, how they are viewed. I found that one very, very striking for that.
Charles Saatchi propped, spots her, supports her for a year and a half, gives her money to prepare an exhibition. In 1994, she's part of the exhibition Young British Artists 3 at Charles Saatchi Gallery, where he has invested in a lot of very, very young artists who are going to be shown in the famous or infamous exhibition Sensation at the Royal Academy of Art in 1997. And this is really interesting because Jenny Saville is doing her little work. She's going, she's journeying into the contemporary art world because she also has an exhibition in 96 at Pace McGill in New York, which is a huge gallery. In 99, she will have an exhibition at Gagosian at 29 years old. Gagosian is a huge gallery. Now Gagosian has galleries all over the world. It's huge. The gallery represents her, still does. So she's set for life, selling her work. And in 97, Sensation happens. The UK loses its mind, along with the Turner Prize, and discovers contemporary art. Tracy Emin's tent with all the lovers' names that she's had sex with embroidered on the tent's sides. And there's this activity of people who seem to do nothing skilled, really, and call it art and sell it for millions. In the BBC, Your Home, Susie, the most incredible, it's on YouTube. I've talked about this in the Tracy Emin episode, and it's the most astonishing program ever made. The title is Painting Dead? And I think in Jenny Saville's context is really interesting because they invite a bunch of people, curators, David Sylvester, like this revered critic, Norman Rosenthal, lots of people, Tracy Emin, drunk as a skunk. She leaves the show midway saying, "Are there real people watching this?" And she leaves, and they're debating in the most horrifically jargony terms whether painting's dead or not. And it's really fascinating to see how Jenny Saville was a painter, was in the show. There were other painters, and there's this question that is being asked. Meanwhile, people keep on painting. And what's also really funny is that in 1994, Jenny Saville produces her first cover for Manic Street Preacher's album, Holy Bible, which is one of those paintings of these massive bodies seen from the left, from the right, and centered. Yeah. She becomes a mum at some point already in the 21st century. Motherhood shifts her perspective. She has a magnificent quote about it, saying, "Giving birth is like being in a Francis Bacon painting." Which I thought was very
so funny,
accurate.
Isn't it? Yeah, that's so. But yeah, so that's lovely. That link with yeah. I'd probably, if I had to describe it, probably would end up being something, theatrical in some way. But yes, that's wonderful.
Exactly.
Yeah. I wonder if she's experienced it at the time, or sort of saw that at the time. During
while it's going on. I don't know about you, but it was not my. No. I didn't have that kind of awareness.
No, but sometimes I do have things where I'm in a situation. I'm like, this is like a play. This is like I'm in Line of Duty, or I'm in EastEnders or something, and I'll sort of be seeing myself in this, and I'm like, this is just weird. Are there cameras?
She started looking at the figures of the Virgin Mary and how they're depicted in painting, and so she really is drawing from motherhood and from her own physical experience of motherhood. And she even says something really interesting about the umbilical cord. She says that she saw that as a kind of a rope that connected her to ancient worlds, and that's why she's going to go into the ancient history. She loves epic poetry. She really is a very classical referenced person, and I think you see that in her work. And so later on, and this is like at the end of the 90s, there's a question of, speaking of representation, that I wanted to bring up about her career, which is the fact that she is very moved by the body. So the body really is the focus of her art, and she's very aware, and she claims it for herself. And at a certain point, she's going to look into types of bodies and she moves away from that Lucian Freud-like skin, and this idea of going into a plastic surgeon's office and going into the archives and even witnessing some operations is very much what she's going to go in search for, besides looking at paintings so precisely and in such detail. And so she does a painting of Della Grace Volcano, who's a queer intersex visual artist, and the painting's called Matrix, and the composition is like Gustave Courbet's painting The Origin of the World, L'Origine du Monde, it was a very famous painting that is permanently at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, and it's two open legs. And in the center of the painting, you have the vulva and you have the pubic area, and it's cut at mid-level, at waist level. So you only see the legs open wide, you see the vulva, and then you see the torso in sort of, you are almost at vagina level, if I might say so, and you don't see the rest of the body. It was the realist movement in France. And it was also this idea that, okay, realism, so let's really paint women. Let's really paint what we see and what we desire. And the male gaze here is really interesting, because in feminist rereadings of contemporary art and also of our own relationship to our own body, there's this discourse about how we don't know our own bodies, how we are not taught to look at our own bodies. Yeah. And here you have a painting of a man who is painting a vulva. And of course, it was a huge scandal at the time. And she was looking at this painting, and she was looking again at quoting this painting visually. but also looking at other types of bodies. And she talks about being fascinated by the fact that there were breasts, and so she continues the body up to the face. There were breasts and there was a penis as well. There's an article about Jenny Saville, a recent article in the New Yorker, who also talks about the other side of things and touches upon this idea of voyeurism of the painter. And so they contacted the person who was in the painting. There's a quote of the model saying that it reproduces the intersex body as a public spectacle and thereby reinforces the status quo. So there's this difficult relationship from the model's perspective, which weirdly enough is what she was trying to subvert in the beginning of her career. And here she's going into kind of the exception. What are the visual exceptions to the regularity or the average visual condition of the body? I copy pasted it. Oh, yes. Okay, so yes. And so there's a quote of the model saying that it reproduces the intersex body as a public spectacle and thereby reinforces the status quo. So there's this difficult relationship from the model's perspective, which weirdly enough is what she was trying to subvert in the beginning of her career. And here she's going into kind of the exception. What are the visual exceptions to the regularity or the average visual condition of the body? And here of gender. I'll leave it at that because I think we'll talk about it in regards to the exhibition, but just referencing in 2009. So she does another Manic Street Preachers album called Journal for Plague Lovers, where there's this painting of a boy. It seems to be a boy with a sort of bloodied face that is in the exhibition, or a version of which is in the exhibition. And the CD at the time was considered inappropriate. And so this is a direct quote from Sainsbury's representatives, who decided not to show the cover of the CD on sale and so kind of stocked it in plain slipcases. So again, this idea, and we know the story of this kid. So speaking of the market context as well, so her London gallerist, so Gagosian, says of her, she's incredibly says of her, so her London gallerist says of her, she's incredibly precise about her process, and there's handsome demand with limited supply.
Oh,
interesting. In 2018, Propt was sold in auction at Sotheby's in London, and it sold for the equivalent of $12.4 million. So I saw this in the New Yorker article and was too lazy to convert it back to pounds. But you can, I mean, it gives you an idea of how expensive it was, and it made her at the time the record price in auction for a work by a living female artist.
Wow.
Now surpassed by Cecily Brown.
So when you sell a piece of work, I don't know this. So did she own that work initially to then sell it, or was it already? Because Saatchi had presented it. Is that right? Initially?
And bought it.
He bought it.
It was the first painting
So what did he buy it for?
I don't know, is the answer. I don't know how much it was at the time. Couldn't find the price, but it certainly wasn't 12 million. I can tell you that. And what happens, and that's a very good question, and a thing that makes it incredibly difficult to evaluate the market. So if you are represented by a commercial gallery, as Jenny Saville is by Gagosian, they list your work, they have a price list, and when you're a collector, you go there and they present you the prices. And so it is a sort of management as well that you get when you're represented by a commercial gallery. That said, there's a lot of secrecy around prices. And so the only perception you have of prices is when you have auctions. And so, as you very rightly asked, what happens is that Saatchi sold his collection, someone bought it. What happens when you're a living artist, which is you're represented by a gallery sells your work, and then it's in a collection. Now it's in an auction house, so completely disconnected, unaffiliated with both the gallery that represents the artist and the artist. So when an artwork, and I worked in commercial galleries, goes into auction of one of the artists you represent as a commercial gallery, panic mode. Yeah. Huge panic. Because what can happen? There's three. There's a possibility of magically it selling for the exact price that you have it priced in your own gallery, or horrifyingly, it sells for less, or befuddlingly, it sells for a shitload of money, 100 times more expensive than what you're selling it for in your gallery, which is not great either. And this is completely disconnected from both the artist and the person who represents them.
Right, so to the artist, this is what I've never actually thought about before. So Jenny Saville's painting sells for $12 million. Does she
and
get
she doesn't
any of
see
it?
a cent.
That's terrible.
That goes to the owner, because it's a question of ownership. You own something. So thus the speculative markets.
I think it's kind of disgraceful.
treble.
It feels very dirty to me, this whole thing.
You heard it here first, dear listeners.
And I'm then assuming that, you know, if this painting of hers sold for 12 million, then her stock goes up. Like she, you know, if you want a Jenny Saville painting, you're going to have to pay a lot for it. Does she then get commissions? And how does she make money? I mean, I've never ever thought about this before. And it's really interesting.
Good question. The value increases because you think, oh, I want to buy a new one, because then it's going to go up.
It's going to take her 5 years to paint it. Yeah.
And she's like, shit, it takes me 2 years to make a painting. You know?
Better do
so
some
she
small
has several
ones.
going on. And there's another angle for it, which is auction prices also tells you where we are in terms of the gender gap. So you will notice that I said at the time, record price paid at auction for a work by a living female artist. To give you an idea, in 2018, the painting Portrait of an Artist, Pool with Two Figures, from 1972 by David Hockney, was sold by approximately $90 million, as opposed to the 12 million of her own work. And in 2008, Damien Hirst's Golden Calf, of also 2008, no, that can't be right, same year, production, sold in auction for 16 million, about 16
that was
million
10 years before.
So more, and 10 years before Jenny Saville.
I suppose you see props in the distance, but the first picture that was the very first one as you go in was I don't know what it was called, unfortunately, but the two girls' faces was very close together, one peeking over the other's shoulder. Huge canvas, massive paint. I was really taken by the texture of it, and being that close, kind of close to this huge amount of paint, and the flesh, and these bright faces, girls' faces. That her work is very well, not all of it actually, but those, certainly this first room, the fleshiness of it, I really and the you really got a sense of the texture of the paint, but also of the feeling of flesh, and and I love, and her eyes. I'm really struck by all the eyes, huge eyes.
They're very realistic, as opposed to all the other impressionistic or gestural, like real big brush strokes. Like she uses these big brushes, and
blobs,
like very
blobs
thick.
that are sort of part of the picture, obviously, but they're just huge chunks of paint, kind of globs of them. But yes, the eyes are really, and I love looking at. Well, I was saying to you that I like looking at portraits of people's faces because I do like looking at people's eyes. And we actually had a discussion about looking into people's eyes, didn't we, before we even went into the exhibition, about how that's the only way you can. That's how you humanise somebody. If you're going to have an argument with someone, swear at someone in your car, you actually look them in the eyes. It really it kind of. You know, you can see a cyclist as just as a thing on a piece of metal, but if you look them in the eye, then they become real. And I think that's what's so wonderful about these huge, oversized pieces of art that are quite clearly not. They're not realistic. They're far too big, but yet they are, because the eyes feel real. You know, you can see into them. And I immediately thought of my daughter, I suppose, and that's the youthfulness, the fleshiness of youth, and the connection between the two heads. It's completely indiscernible in a way. It's almost like a two-headed creature.
It's almost like a two-headed creature.
For a moment, I thought I really had to look quite closely to see that she was actually had the one behind had her chin on the other's shoulder. But yeah, that close, that connection, the between two young people, and that you can be so close and so physical with another person. That's either a sister possibly or a friend that you might not necessarily have as a grown
and
up.
this skin to skin connection. And then in the other room, there's what we talked about before, which is these 90s paintings, where you have, again, an indentation on the painting. You have a body of a naked woman. And in this case, it was the painter's finger that touched the image and made these lines around inside the body that kind of outlined the shape of the body. And she explained that some friends of hers, so this is the 90s diet culture, and so she explains that some friends actually drew these lines, that as the place where they wanted their bodies to lose weight into, or to be reduced to, because they were obsessed with being skinny, because that was kind of the 90s sort of culture. And she talks about not being really touched by that culture, and but being very aware of it. And the Manic Street Preachers album, a lot of the songs talk about anorexia, and she was really interested in being part of it because of that.
Yeah. It's and the lines she draws are quite circular. I mean, there's no way you could, I suppose, shrink down to what that. But in a way, that's what it was like. You know, you can't lop off limbs to become as thin as people wanted to be, I suppose. Something about mapping the body as well, and how that just being unhappy with everything about your own physicality. It's very sad.
She's in the paintings quite a bit. She wants to be in that tradition. I had a hard time understanding the flipping of the narrative, like full disclosure. And I was interested in seeing where she was going to take this. And I proposed that we go to the Manic Street Preachers image, which is the painting, which is not that far away. So you cross that corridor, you have the one with the knickers and the bra that we described earlier, and then we have
it was on its own, wasn't it? It's on its own in that space. Yes.
And so I remember you being really captured by that image.
Yeah, I think partly because there was colour, and I think her work, apart from the final images and the most recent images, in the final room, which are very colourful, there isn't a lot of colour. There was a moment when there were two images in another room of female. There was two females possibly, or a female and a male entwined with lines across them. One of them was quite dark and used darker colour, I think maybe a darker red, and the other one has pinkish lines, sort of coral coloured lines, a little bit of blue, not a lot of colour on either, but I was more drawn to the brighter colour. It made me feel more positive about it. And I thought that's really interesting. This kind of the what colour you use completely affects how you feel about the image. And I was drawn to this very large portrait. I felt it was a young girl, but it's a boy.
I'm not sure.
I think. Well, I did. I've googled the.
Oh, did you?
Talk about the Mannix pitch and how that was covered over in shops because it was deemed offensive in some way because it could be seen as blood, blood and pain and lips that have been bloodied. But in fact, it's an image she took of a boy, or well, presumably it's a boy, but with a port wine stain, so a very large birthmark across their face. Which I remarked when you look. I took a picture of it and I could see that more clearly through my camera. I could see it was very clearly a port wine mark, whereas if you're looking at it with the naked eye, it could be there's multiple
and very close to it.
multiple different ways of reading it. But it's a beautiful blue behind the image and very
it's a sort of electric blue,
and
right?
The blue's reflected
but a
in
bit
her
deep.
hair. It's a very well. We sort of talked about it being quite anime. And that kind of graphic novel type image because it was so. It's the image is so strong. The face is so strong against this very deep colour, which was reflected in the hair. It's very. I really loved. I loved all the lines of it and there's so much going on. And also so many that idea of different interpretations of what's the expression.
The eyes are very, so it's interesting because the colors, so she collects a lot of imagery. She says it's a pain to travel with her because she takes pictures of everything, and she loves taking pictures of graffiti in foreign countries because it takes out the political message, and she's only looking at the color and the writing, a little bit like the Cy Twombly's, as it were, because now you know Cy Twombly, so you can say a little bit like Cy Twombly's, and you'd be like, yes,
feel
Joanna.
very erudite. Yes,
absolutely. And so,
you're referencing them at all times. No one will know what I'm talking about.
And Esther will be like, what the hell are you talking about, Susie?
I've got the knowledge now.
And so she's she's got inspired by those spray colors, but also when she had children, she started looking at the colors that children wear and that children are drawn to, like these neon colors and these fluorescent colors. And so she changed her palette quite a bit, which is the case of all the portraits at the end. So that looked like graffiti or street art a little bit.
Definitely.
So she went from this fleshy color to these kinds of paintings. And in this case particularly, there's a whole bunch. So it's the case of the intersex sex worker, and there's the case of her looking for bodies that are different, but which are also othered because of their difference. And she's focusing on them and reducing them to that otherness. So there's this criticism, which is, for me, the limits of the exercise of flipping the narrative and not really interrogating the language that you're absorbing from centuries and centuries of patriarchal painting with enormous qualities, but also a very specific point of view and a specific role in history. Because painting's historicized before TV, before photography. I did not have this impression of motherhood, of physicality, of the skin. For me, it was all about painting and this endless for that image that finally strikes you and situates or deconstructs enough, like you were saying quite rightly so, you don't see the port wine stain, you see blood, you see a hero of an anime character, you see so many things, and she does that really well. But there's also this kind of stigmatization of otherness.
Well, yes, and I also, because I was like, well, who is this person? And it was a picture she'd found in a book, and I thought, I don't know, if I saw,
you did say that,
if that was me, and I saw myself, I recognised myself, and of course, having a port wine stain is something people are going to look at and stare and point at, and to have to put it on the front of an album that then has to be covered up because it's kind of offensive. I was like, oh God,
that's a sad
really
story
sad.
for that poor child.
Really sad.
It looks like a child.
Yeah, it does. It's definitely a young person.
Yeah.
There is something slightly uncomfortable about that, I think. The motherhood thing, just wondering about my own... I felt like the images of her holding the babies, and they're so you do get those the flashes of the Virgin holding baby Jesus and these kind of podgy figures. Baby Jesus is always quite well behaved, doesn't really wriggle around very much. I did get the sense of having to grapple with a sort of this kind of almost a creature. I think they are at that age, these creatures, and that of having to be still and be the solid.
So just to explain, these are these drawings that you were describing that were in graphite, and then these red crayons or blue, and it was this woman sitting a little bit like the Virgin Mary holding the baby, and she said that she did a research, and the only painting or drawing I think she found was of Rembrandt of a Virgin Mary holding, or even not even the Virgin Mary, mother trying to hold a child, and there's a kind of like a shoe flying off from the child's foot, and because it's hard to contain the child. But all the other children in classic painting, they're just, because they're Jesuses, they have the wisdom. So I don't know. So she was really trying to revisit that iconography from the motherhood perspective. So the Virgin Mary's perspective, whereby they're trying to hold the child for a family photo, and the children are naked. And there's even one where there's a kind of this small little penis sticking out, kind of like almost towards you. It's such a weird drawing.
Yes, it's really is in your face, literally, isn't it? It's
right. Yeah. That's the only time where I was thinking, oh, that brings memories of nappies.
I mean, yes, especially the penis is kind of it's always the danger when you're changing a little boy's nappy.
The thing really
is it going to
clean.
Is it going to pee in my face? Basically, if you've never changed a little boy's nappy, this is what it's like. You have to be really super careful.
We have to wrap it up because you have to pick up your children. And I think that's the perfect way to finish it, because that's motherhood and that's what parenting is in contemporary life.
I felt like I've learnt things. And I think that's, if I go to see an exhibit, I always want to be able to learn something about another perspective or about my own interpretation of something or my own experience, other people's experience. And actually, I've learnt about art. I have learnt about painting, and of course about Jenny Saville, but other painters as well. And it's so enriching. What an enriching experience to be on your podcast. It's been really fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, and likewise. It was such a pleasure to have you over.
Thank you.
And I hope you come back.
I will definitely come back. I'd love to go to another exhibition with you. Thanks, Joanna.
Take care. Bye-bye. Exhibitionistas is an independent podcast created and hosted by me, Joana P.R. Neves. We have episodes every 2 weeks, and this season 3, is a bit of a turning point. We have 5 new episode types, from more experimental art travelogues or art stories to conversational formats about solo exhibitions with people who are not part of the industry, because we're all both actors and spectators of art and life. If you're new here, you have a whole catalogue of episodes to enjoy. Discover them at your own pace